Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. Hi, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Moffett, Industry Marketing Manager for our entertainment business at Autodesk. Thanks so much for joining us today. These are really challenging times, and from every one of us at Autodesk, we hope that you are all staying safe and healthy. We really appreciate that you're taking the time out of your day to join us for a couple of hours to hear about what we've been up to on the Maya front. Like you, we are all working from home, and we've done as much as we can to troubleshoot the webinar today. We ask that you please bear with us if there are any technical difficulties or connection issues. I hope that that will not be the case, though. We have a great lineup of speakers for you today. First up on the agenda, TJ, who is our Senior Product Manager for Maya, will take you through the latest updates in Maya 2020. He'll be followed by Mark Tanner, who is the Senior Product Owner for Animation at Autodesk, and he'll go over what's new on the animation front specifically. Then we'll hand the floor over to CEO and founder Jakob Balslev and Creative Director Sam Lazarus from Rokoko for an overview of the motion library. Mark will then come back up along with special guests Zac Swartout and Eric Jacobus from SuperAlloy Interactive, which is a super cool studio focused on motion capture for games, film, and VR. Some of you may recognize Eric from a little game called God of War. They'll chat about the do's and don'ts of motion capture. And finally, we'll close the event out with a live Q&A. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to TJ. Take it away, TJ.
All right, hello. Coming to you live from, as Jocelyn said, my house. So yeah, I'm the Senior Product Line Manager here. I'm gonna just give you a quick overview of a few of the key highlights, and then we're gonna really dive deep into some pretty cool topics. So I'm pretty excited for that stuff, so I'll get through my stuff fairly quickly for you. But I did want to take a little bit of time to mention there's quite a few things that we packed in. So Maya 2020 was a major release for us. We put a lot of effort into it. And of course, we put in stuff every update. And so some of the stuff you're hearing today came out in the latest update, 2020.1. But the big highlights here, as you can see, we've put a lot of work into Bifrost. We're marketing for serious effects, and you can do all sorts of crazy stuff, which we'll show you a little bit of. If you haven't seen any of that stuff, it's worth getting online and check it out. We also made a lot of work over the years, 2019, 2020, etc. But even before then, to really push the speed of animation. So hopefully you're in this world now where you don't need to play blast anymore, which is fantastic. You can just sit there and hit play. And that should save you a lot of time every day if you're animating. 2020, as Mark will get into, we put in over 60 features, a lot of work in making animation faster and easier. Hopefully some of those are stuff that you can't live without anymore. And with Arnold, we managed to move that to the GPU, so you can render, super fast. So we'll show you a couple of highlights on those fronts. But one of the first questions we usually get is like, okay, that's cool. That's what you did. Where are you headed? And so I wanted to make sure we just took a minute to talk about that. Obviously, as I said, Bifrost is a big effort for us, and you can see this really cool smoke flame thing igniting. It's actually all physically accurate, so it's actually like a propellant that's lighting up and fire, and we're continuing to invest in Bifrost and doing a bunch of really cool stuff there. If you want to get in on the beta and check it out where we're headed, please reach out. We can do that. Of course, the other big thing for me, I came from the trenches and I used to work in the industry behind the desk, and really want to make sure that that experience is good for you. So stability and performance, we've done a lot over the years trying to fix bugs and crashes, and hopefully you found Maya. If you haven't upgraded in a little while, it's worth checking out because 2020 is definitely a very stable release. And I know we say that every year, but we honestly put a lot of effort into doing that every year. So that's with reason. And then where we're headed, we've got a bunch of different things we're doing, but today we'll talk a little bit about the animation side of things, but we're also doing other things, like we're heavily invested in open standards, and we've got a large team working on USD right now. There's some stuff already being posted on Area you can check out, as well as Python 3. Python 3 is a big push for us, and this year we've actually already got versions on the beta program. If you're interested in trying that out, we'd love to get your feedback as well. So quite a few good things coming, and of course I'm not going to spend all day talking about that, so Let me just give you a couple of the highlights and then we'll really dive deep on the animation side. But I like to show this one because often people don't realize or haven't sort of turned on some of the features, but this is the viewport right now. So you can actually have the viewport looking this good um, right now. And you can see here in this example, we've got an Arnold Sky Dome. So all you have to do is make an Arnold Sky Dome. There it is. Put an image into the actual color, and suddenly you get PBR reflections and all sorts of good stuff happening. So if you're using Arnold standard surface, or what we just called standard surface now, and the IBL like image-based lighting in that Sky Dome light, you should be getting reflections like this. And we've done a lot of work over the last few variations, and you can see here this truck is looking pretty good. Hopefully you're modeling at that level at this point. Um, as I mentioned, Arnold is on GPU. 13 times faster is what the claim is here, but the reality is it doesn't matter to me if it's 10 or 13 or whatever, that I just want it fast. And so we've done a lot of work in making sure not only does it go fast on your GPU, but you can also see your various denoising that we've put in. So we've done a lot of work to really make your life a lot easier. And as you saw in that viewport, hopefully your viewport already looks like the render to begin with. Bifrost, if you haven't seen, like I said, we've got a lot of really cool examples out here. Here's an example of the Lincoln Aviator commercial that the mill did. So all this purple smoke is being done in Bifrost, which is pretty cool. But there's a number of other things you can do, whether it's sand and smoke, and we're investigating into cloth and a variety of things. So again, worth checking out. You can grab the latest plugin, and it works in a number of versions of Maya at this point. Load times is a big deal. So a few years ago, we went around and we asked people, and the industry average is about 20 minutes to load and save, and that's just not where we want to be. So as you can see here, this example went from 18 down to 2, and it's getting faster every iteration. A number of these little areas like dense meshes or many objects, etc. A lot of works went into that. A good pro tip is if you have a scene with stuff that you can hide, it will actually load faster if it's hidden, because you do have an invisibility evaluator where once you're in the viewport, it'll actually work fast, but also on load time now, we're taking advantage of that as well. So some pretty cool stuff there. The nice chart that sort of sticks out for me is this one. This is actually an FBX file that we got from one of the large AAA studios. It was literally one of the Game of the Year files, one of their biggest cinematics, and we went to load it, and it took an hour and 18 minutes, right? And that's crazy. I thought literally, I sat here and tried to load it, and I thought my computer had crashed. And so when we timed it and we did a number of work, you can see here that hour and 18 minutes down to 6 minutes, which is amazing. And as I said, with the work that we're doing in the beta right now, along with USD and some other cool stuff, that same scene can load in 3 seconds. So again, if you're interested in that sort of thing, check it out. This is where we call Maya next, or where we're headed. But you can see we're really trying to make it easy for you to just hit save all the time and not worry about oh, it's going to take me a large chunk of time to hit save, so I don't. We want to get that out of your mind. So pretty excited where we're headed. On top of all that, once you've loaded, you still got to work. So as I said, we've got a number of things you can dig into our what's new, whether it's faster UV editor or different how we handle textures and a number of things. Over the years, we've added a number of other stuff. So latest third-party plugin that we sort of started with was we redid the Substance plugin along with the team at Adobe. And you can see here in the viewport, Substance looks really great. You can actually texture and do a whole bunch of good stuff directly in the viewport. So you can see that. Again, download this, check it out. It's there for you right now. And that really set us up for a number of other things that we're about to talk about. This is a nice sort of history lesson I like to show where, again, we went from making Maya multi-threaded to starting to leverage all the GPUs, and a bunch of different deformers are now on the GPU, to then really pushing into cache playback and leveraging a RAM. So at this point, we're trying to take care of making this speed up on any number of different things, whether it's different threads or your GPU or your RAM. So often we get asked, like, what should I buy? It really depends on what you're working on, of course, but we'll try to take advantage of whatever your system actually has. So it's important to know that, this hasn't been an overnight thing. This has been, as you can see here, like 5, 6, 7 years of effort that's really gotten us to this point where we were kind of threw the gauntlet down back in like 2014, where we wanted Maya to be 10 times faster, and we're starting to get to that point now. So it's really satisfying to see that. And if you are hitting issues, and we have people on the chat right now, you can ask them, but we definitely are trying to keep pushing that forward. So hopefully you're finding your scenes are just getting better and better. Here's some of that examples with some pretty pictures. So you can see, you know, obviously going from this same scene from 1 frame a second to 60, you know, that kind of speaks for itself. But this is literally 60 soldiers with mocap. And the reason I'm taking the time on this is because we wanted to do things in the right order. So we took a lot of time to make sure that Maya gets super performant, can handle all this kind of crazy mocap and dense data. And that's now setting us up to talking about what we're talking about today, where we're actually leveraging mocap and putting a bunch of really cool stuff in Maya itself, which is pretty neat. In 2020, one of the things that we added was image planes and dynamics. So I'll show you the video. Hopefully this is playing well over Zoom, but we used to have problems with the image plane actually playing back fairly slowly. Now it should hold up to what you need because it's getting used, you know, in the cache as well. And so that was really one of the big pushes for 2020. The other big thing here, as you can see, if you're really careful there, there's actually an orange bar as well as the blue bar. And what that allows us to do is start starting to split the cache up so we can have multiple caches going on. And so in this example, we're caching dynamics. So we're actually caching the cloth of his cape on a secondary level. So the animation controls get cached first. You can do all your animation like you normally would. And normally then if you wanted to see the cape and see it's doing all kinds of crazy stuff on his arm, you'd have to playblast, right? Now with that actually caching on a secondary level, you can actually let that catch up to you as you're working and be able to scrub and hit play and see it all live. So again, the team has done a bunch of really cool stuff there. A lot of effort's gone into it. Got a number of really smart people. And rather than me just sort of giving you like the high level kind of here's a few things, what we wanted to do is actually drill into some of those and take the time and actually answer your questions as we go. So you can see here, there's always over 60 features. And so what I like to do is actually hand this over to Mark now, and he's actually going to dive deep into a bunch of these to actually answer your questions and show you what we've done. So we'll let Mark grab the screen from here.
Thanks, TJ. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Bear with me here. Okay, so yeah. Hi everybody, I'm Mark. I'm the Senior Product Owner of Animation. And as TJ noted, I'll be showing you guys all the new features we've packed into Maya 2020. Some of the topics we'll be covering are the graph editor improvements, our new audio workflows, new keyframe workflows, some improvements to how ghosting works, as well as our new time slider bookmarks. First off, we have the graph editor. So a number of improvements here, including automatic grids. So you'll see if you zoom in, your graph actually updates, and you can actually see the values of your timeline much clearer, and you don't get lost, as well as we've given you the ability to zoom in much closer. This wasn't possible before. We've also added the time marker back into the modern graph editor, so that's nice to have, so you can see what current frame you're on as you're playing back in the graph editor. We've also added the ability to highlight the effective curve. So when you select a key in the graph editor, you'll see the part of the curve that's being affected by the tangent that you might be manipulating. We've also changed the key view. So in the bottom right of the screen, you can see key scaling. We've added the ability to customize your key scale with a key scaling mechanism. We also changed the default value of our key scale about 20%. And also we changed the way you look at your default keys. We have a detailed view as well as the normal view, depending on how you're working with curves. So we know a lot of our customers are working with motion capture, they're working with keyframe data. You might want smaller keys if you're dealing with really dense data at a higher frame rate. If you're keyframing something, you might want more control and more visibility. So we've given you that customization. On top of this, we've got a new default color theme for our modern graph editor. It's got higher contrast, more vibrant colors, more consistent colors. We know animators are spending a lot of time in the graph editor, many hours, so we want to make this as pleasant as possible. We've also given you 5 preset themes that you can play with, including our classic theme. And we've also given you the ability to customize to any color. So if you don't get quite the right setting in your preset theme, you can just go in and customize as much as you like. We've also given you the ability to save these out, export these themes to your team, to your friends, and save them for later. And we've also added a new feature where you've got the play range shade option. So you can see here we've got a darker tone to the left of your start frame and to the right of your last frame. So you can really see what you've got highlighted in your frame range. And you can change the color of that as well. Next up, we have new volume control right inside of Maya. So we've got new audio workflows right inside Maya. Before, audio was actually dependent on your operating system. So now if you want to listen to a soundtrack or some other audio input while you're doing facial animation, for instance, you can do this and control the audio separately within Maya with its own volume control. There's a separate audio menu if you right-click on the volume slider icon. And you can also right-click on the timeline as well to manipulate, change your audio files, as well as manage your files like deleting and muting sounds. And you can also do this by deleting files in the outliner, which is handy as well. Now to our keyframe animation workflows. We've got a bunch of new stuff here for our keyframe animators. A lot of quality life stuff that TJ's already mentioned. Number one, we've got a bunch of changes to how we insert keys, both inside and outside of the graph editor. So if you want to set a key and preserve the key shape while you're in auto tangent mode, you have the option to do that. We also have the ability to preserve your tangent type on insert. So if you have a specific tangent type that you want to insert that you want to affect your curve, you can do that as well. And we've also given you the ability to insert keys outside of the graph editor, controlling specific channels if you like. So again, a lot of new control with how you set keys and insert keys. We've also given you the ability to access tangent weights right inside of the graph editor, the ability to customize your default tangents by giving you access to the preferences within the graph editor instead of going to the Maya preferences every time. And we've given you some new icons right inside the graph editor that you can see in the bottom left GIF there. So you can quickly just select the icon and change your tangent in and out, for instance. We've also got a number of hotkeys, like nudging keys, a frame or two, cycling between your keyframes with hotkeys, to mention a few. So look out for those. Some more keyframe workflow work we've done is we've given you the ability to snap the current time to the key that you have selected in the graph editor. We've given you some new display modes that you can cycle through, being able to toggle the visibility using a hotkey instead of having to select a display layer, create a display layer, maybe rely on a rigger to set up your rig that way. So that's really nice to do when you're doing play blast or you want to preview your animation without all the controls. We've also given you a lot more access to all the animation hotkeys. We know that animation hotkeys are prime real estate. There's not a lot of room there, so we've given you the ability to change those and given you access to things like the keyframe tangent marking menu, for instance. On top of this, we tried to simplify things at the same time. So there's the simplified toolbar in the graph editor. So you'll see a theme here. We're trying to give animators control. We're trying to give them more options, but also simplify and make the workflows more efficient. Next up, we have our new ghosting workflows. Most importantly, we're supporting deforming geometry. So you can see in my GIF here, I've got a character with multiple parts, all deforming, working with cache playback. I think I'm getting about 30 frames a second on this one. It's really nice to be able to scrub with your ghosts on and fine tune your animation, take a look at your spacing. We've given you the ability to change the color and opacity of your ghosts so you can display your keyframes, excuse me, and control the steps in between, how many keyframes before and after, and whatnot. So that's a great new feature. Highly recommend you jump in and test that out. Next up is our big new feature, is our time slider bookmarks. It's very common for animators to spend a lot of time changing the time slider to really get into the details when they're fine-tuning maybe a foot placement or a certain part of a dialogue. And it's frustrating because you actually have to go in and change the time slider yourself, and then you lose sort of that bookmark for future use. So what we've done is we've given you the ability to create colored bookmarks and save these out and rename them. You can frame and switch between these playback ranges using hotkeys, and you can also manage these bookmarks in the bookmark manager, where you can rename them, change the color. You can also cycle between them in there, and then you can also edit and create hotkeys for these same functions as well. So if you're really looking to refine and take notes and these types of things, this is a great tool for you. And of course, we've given you the ability to edit the hotkeys. Again, we know that real estate is hard to come by. So if you're finding yourself using these bookmarks a lot, you can go in and add them to your hotkeys. We've also got some great updates to the time slider, as well as the time ruler in the graph editor. So first off, we have the ability to change the placement of the time ruler in the graph editor. And we've also got a nice new feature with our timeline start frame, where you can actually go in your preferences right inside the graph editor and change where your start frames is in your timeline. So if you're animating for games and you want to start on frame 0, you can change that, and your graph editor will actually, your grid will actually start at that time, which is really, really handy. If you're working on a specific shot, say you're on frame 200, you can go in and change that as well. And that's highlighted as well by our the color change there you can see in the GIF on the right. So if you want to really focus again on specific parts of animation, maybe you're working on a sequence, these controls are really nice to have. We've got some other hotkeys and control updates, like updating step forward and backwards in time. So along with the new hotkeys we have here, we've also given you the ability to cycle using your hotkeys. So when you hit the last frame on your timeline, it'll actually automatically go to frame 1. And this actually works in conjunction with the play controls now. So that wasn't the case before, and we've improved that and also given you the option to go back to how it was if you're used to that workflow. We've also given you the ability to resize the time slider, as you can see in the bottom left. So along with all our new waveform display settings with audio, our cache playback bars, and the bookmarks, we felt it would be good to give you guys a little more real estate there to play with, depending on your workflow. We've also added some nice new functionality for snapping keys on scale, as well as on the frame rate switch. So another common thing for animators is to go into your timeline or your graph editor, grab a bunch of keys and start playing with the timing and scale those things out. The frustrating part with that was a lot of times those keyframes would get off frame. So you wouldn't be on whole frames, you'd be on half frames, between frames. If you're running from, say, 60 frames a second and you switch to 24 or 30 frames per second, you're getting frames all over the place, and it was just really, really hard to manage. So we've given you the ability to snap keys on scale, which is really handy for keeping things clean and organized. Lastly, we have a new constraint. It's a super powerful constraint that I'm a big fan of, and I think you guys will really enjoy it once you get your hands on it. It's really a quick parent locator constraint, but the great thing about it is it works on deforming geometry, and you can select any face or point on this geometry. And what this does is it constrains a locator to that position, and it goes along for the ride. So you can imagine how great this is for constraining, say, a character's hands to another character, maybe constraining props. Maybe you have a button on a shirt that you want to go for the ride. You can also use this for tracking using motion trails. So that's really handy to have as well. So check that out. Let us know what you think. And lastly, really excited about our new partnership with Rokoko, as I'm sure you've heard. We've got a great talk coming up with the gang from Rokoko, and they're going to go through our motion library workflows and our pipeline. I can't say enough how excited we are about this right now, especially with the current situation. So many people working from home, motion capture studios shut down, whether they're internal or external partners. Check us out. There's thousands of animation assets online right now. One button click in Maya, and you're off to the races. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to, I believe, Jakob and the folks from Rokoko.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark. Let's go there. I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay. Hey, everybody. I am Jakob. I am the CEO and founder of Rokoko, coming to you live from Copenhagen, Denmark. Now with my co-founder Matthias, who's sitting opposite me. He's sort of undercover. He's gonna answer all your questions on the Q&A. So please, we hope you'll just ask away, and he'll be there, and we'll try to respond as well as we can. We also have our creative director Sam Lazarus sitting in San Francisco. In a moment, he will be demoing the Motion Library, this new product for you all live, and that is, of course, what this is all about. But before that, I'm just going to say a few words about Rokoko, our company. We set out a couple of years back on a mission to make these high-end motion capture tools available to all creators. We basically want to take motion capture out of the studios and out of the labs and all the places it's been restricted historically, and say we want to transform this ability to record and capture human motion. We want to turn it into a spontaneous and creative tool that you can use anywhere, that you always have at hand, and that you can operate single-handedly. No sort of booking a studio, booking an actor, just like, I want this now, how can I get it? So the first thing we did was invent a suit, Smart Suit Pro, a sensor-based motion capture suit that we've been shipping for a couple of years. We have thousands of amazing creators all over the world working with it, a lot of Maya users, and doing exactly this use case where they're actually sort of having it right. So they have a mouse and a keyboard and a motion capture suit, and they get an idea, they just jump in it, create this animation that they have in their mind, and then they just try it out, see if that was it, use it for previs, for blocking out scenes. It's such a great tool to sort of working more, it's adapting more to this non-linear workflow that many of you have now, where you never know when inspiration strikes and you just want to do mocap. The problem is that even though I have a suit, often have a suit right at hand, it's not all movements I can do. I can just speak for myself. I can't do ballet or any kind of backflip stuff that you'll see Eric Jacobus maybe doing a bit. So even though I have a suit, I sometimes need motions that I can't perform. So that's one of the reasons we made the Motion Library. So the Motion Library is a marketplace of motion assets. We have motion capture creators on one side that have publisher profiles. They upload the assets that they create to this marketplace. And then we have users on the other side searching for the assets and buying them off of these creators. So a motion capture studio will create old lady walking or old lady shooting arrow from a horseback. And then a creator will search for that, find it, and buy it. So it's a way, sort of a stock library marketplace where you can find thousands of assets of all types and all shapes. One thing we wanted to make sure is these marketplaces are often sort of, can be hard to find the quality on big marketplaces. So to start with, we said, okay, we only want sort of AAA quality motion capture assets. So the publishers, the studios that are providing the assets now are the best in the world. It is Centroid, for instance, in London, that did motion capture on Pirates of the Caribbean and James Bond and Assassin's Creed, Audio Motion, another studio from that league. So you know that what is on there has been created in a big, often like these big optical volumes by a professional performer that's doing exactly these kind of cinematic stuff that you want. Another thing that we wanted was to get right where the users were. So the whole idea with Rokoko is sort of speed and accessibility. It has to be accessible at all times. So you don't want to go elsewhere, you just want to access everything where you already are. And of course, Maya was sort of the prime place we wanted to be, where the world's most skilled animators are, the ones that can really leverage these assets and adjust them and make them fit exactly their work and implement them in their workflow. So we spoke with TJ and Mark and the awesome team at Autodesk, and we've been working on this plugin that we launched a month ago. And yeah, it's been just super rewarding seeing you all explore it and getting all your feedback and yeah, seeing it come to life. And this is only the beginning. And as I said, we really want to implement all the things to make this suit exactly what you want it to be. So yeah, let us know what you think about it, and so we can work with those things. But before I say what's coming, what's in the pipeline, Sam is actually going to show you how it all works and looks right inside of Maya. So let me just unshare my screen here. Yes, okay, Sam, it's all yours.
Hey everyone. So I'll share my screen here. So as you know, Jacob said, thank you to Autodesk and Maya for having us here. I'm super excited to take you through a little tour of the motion library. So as Jacob said, the motion library is our marketplace of motion capture assets. We have tons of assets on here from AAA publishers who have done, all the best games and movies and everything. And you can always find out more information about the motion library at motionlibrary.com if you're curious beyond this demo. So let's jump into Maya here. And one of the things we're really excited about with Maya 2020.1 is that the motion library has been added natively into Maya now. So now everything is integrated within Maya. It's all easy. It's a couple clicks and you can get your motion capture into Maya really simply, and that is fantastic. It makes workflows easier, and that's kind of what we're all about. So here we have just we have a character in Maya here that I have set up, and this character is rigged. It's got a little skeleton ready to go, and so Maya's tools make it really easy to retarget mocap data onto our characters, just using the human IK panel here. So I've got my character here, and I just need to add in our source, and we'll have some mocap working. So if I want to actually grab some mocap from Motion Library, we just go up to Windows here, Animation Editors, and then right here we have the Motion Library integrated natively into Maya. And so when we click Motion Library here, we get this little pop-up, and here is the Motion Library. And so this panel is like a little floating panel here. We can adjust it to however we want it to look. And this is the same motion library that you have access to through our software. No matter where you're accessing the motion library, it's always the same, full library of assets. So you have access to everything, even within Maya. And as Jocelyn, oh yeah.
Do you mind hitting stop share and share again and see if that optimized screen share?
Oh yeah,
off,
sure.
It's still super blurry. Sorry guys.
Sure. Let's
we
try sharing this again.
Stream a little bit smoother, but let's see if this works. Yeah, that's
okay.
better. Thanks, man.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
There we go. Yeah, and as Jocelyn said at the beginning, any lag or anything or low resolution is all just from the Zoom presentation. Everything is looking clean and crispy on my end. So we open up Motion Library, and this is kind of the front page. And as you can see, we have just a ton of assets here that we see immediately. If you hover your mouse over these assets, they'll start playing. You can kind of rotate around. We have some basic information here. You can also double click into these assets and you'll get an expanded view, and you can rotate around more. You can actually play with the playback here. So if I want to watch this in slow-mo, which can be really helpful when you're looking at some action mocap or something, this can be kind of cool. We also have just information about the publisher. and kind of some general information. And so if we jump back out here, one of the other things that was important to us is being able to organize all of this motion capture data. We have so many assets that we want you to be able to find what you're looking for. So to do that, we have just kind of a general search bar here. You know, I can search for walking assets and we'll get all the different walking assets. And then beyond that, if I want to organize, you know, these further, I can go to this filters tab, you know, organize by dance or, you know, adventure, or whatever it is. As we continue to add assets, we're going to continue to refine our search. And, you know, as we get new categories of assets, we get quadrupeds or horses or something, we'll have a category for that. And so we continue to refine all this searching to make sure it's the most optimized to find stuff. If we just kind of keep cruising through here, we can also, you know, search by pure category. We can search by publisher, and we're going to take a look at SuperAlloy Interactive in a second, which is Eric Jacobus and Zac Swartout's mocap company that we worked with for the launch of Motion Library. And then finally, the thing that we just added is that we have the ability now to preview different meshes on all this mocap. So if we want to, you know, see it with our character Rammer here, who's our warrior character, we can select him, jump back out, and now we have this mesh on here that so we can actually see, you know, how this mocap is going to look on a character. And we're going to be continuing to add new characters, and you'll soon be able to download these meshes with the mocap itself, which will be cool. And we're going to continue to add characters. And this warrior character, we're actually going to be giving away for free. If you want to grab him and start playing with them, just check out our social channels and we'll have information on how to grab him to start playing around with some stuff. Okay, so that is a little tour. Now let's actually jump in and, you know, find some mocap for our character. So I've opened up Motion Library. I want to grab some motion capture. I'm going to jump to SuperAlloy Interactive, the publisher. So this is Eric Jacobus and Zac Swartout's motion capture company. Eric was God of War for the PlayStation game God of War, which is amazing, and his work is incredible. And so we reached out and we worked with SuperAlloy to produce a pack of free assets for the launch of Motion Library. So all of these assets are free. And we actually have a lot of free assets on the Motion Library that you can test out and demo from all the different publishers. So if you jump on right now, you can download these immediately. All you need is a little, you know, Rokoko ID, and then you can download all these directly into Maya. So let's grab an asset to download into our scene. So to buy an asset, you know, you would normally kind of click this shopping cart icon, and then you would go and you would purchase the asset. These are free, so you would just be able to download it directly. But I've already grabbed a couple, so I'm going to download one of the ones I've already purchased. And, you know, let's say that we like this vertical attack downward. Let's check this guy out. Okay. So this is kind of like a samurai swordy, lightsabery kind of motion. Let's say that we like it and we want to grab it and put it into our scene. So to get this mocap data in, it's as easy as just downloading it here. And this is actually downloading this FBX in the background to your computer. So it's available on your computer if you want to grab it and, I don't know, organize it or do something else with it. And I'm just seeing the chat and Rokoko code. So a lot of these motions are actually free. So there's no code needed. You can just jump on right now and download a lot of these demo assets. But as soon as I've downloaded an asset, I get this import button. And so if I click this, you can see that some magic just happened here. And now we have that asset in our scene directly. And the great thing about, you know, having this built in natively into Maya is that this asset we downloaded already has a characterization definition on it. So to get it on our character, we just go to source, character, that's the animation we just downloaded, and boom, that's it. And having it be this easy is really a game changer. As someone who uses mocap, half the battle can just be getting, you know, mocap into your scene, I just want to see it quickly. I want to iterate, quickly. I just want to do some previs, and I don't want to get in the weeds on a bunch of process in order to get everything linked up. And so just having this be native means you can click it, it goes into my scene, retarget the animation, and I'm done. And so this is really great for previs or blocking. And I've actually got another scene that I just kind of set up. And this, this took me 5 minutes. I downloaded some mocap really quickly, set up a few cameras, and I kind of already have this scene which lets me get a sense of kind of what I'm doing. Maybe I'm reacting, I can take this to someone and they can react against it. I can play with, camera angles. I love POV angles. So I've parented some cameras to some joints. And now I've got this cool POV angle. And you can really just kind of jump around, quickly and see a ton of different, camera angles and just kind of play around. And that's one of the great things about having this mocap accessible so easily. It kind of opens up this, it's so easy. You can just play with the assets now. You don't need to worry about all this process. You can just get to the meat of kind of creating and art directing or whatever it may be. So that was a pretty quick little run through. I'm actually going to turn it back over to Jakob right now. And, we can demo some more stuff if we have some more time later. But thank you to everyone. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jakob to show you guys some of the new features that are coming up soon. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Sam. Perfect. Okay, I can see we're still learning how to do the chat here. Sorry, I was just messaging only panelists for a second there. Yeah, but great. Thanks a lot for the question. So one question I just want to make sure you all know is that so the motion capture assets on the library currently are not from our SmartSuite Pro, actually. We might have SmartSuite Pro, so Rokoko users on there as publishers in time. But right now, as I said, it's only sort of these huge studios that typically almost all of them have Vicon, sort of large Vicon volumes. And then we have Eric Jacobus that you'll see in a bit that's using an Xsen suit. But currently it's not, so it's not related to our suit currently, but it might be in time. Okay, anyway, so a look at what's coming, what's already being built. So as I said, it's been out, this motion library, for months now, and we've had a lot of great feedback and a lot of wishes from you all on what to create. One huge thing that should have been part of the release, but we just couldn't get it ready in time, was support of 4K monitors. Obviously, for a crowd like you, that's crucial. It works on 4K monitors, it's just not super optimized for it. So that is coming and is already being built. We'll also be adding the ability to sort of favorite and like stuff, so you can add them to your collections. You'll also be able to follow creators and communicate with them and comment. So we basically want you to sort of find your favorite creator that's doing exactly the kind of work that you need, and speak directly to him and her about, so what would you like to get done, and sort of, yeah, get that interaction going. We'll also enable you to be able to share lists and projects between your teams. We'll have a lot more of these preview characters that Sam showed. We have this warrior called Rømer, good Danish name. He is right now available as a preview character and will be available for download, as Sam said. So you can all use him as you please. That's the guy we have here in the back on my screen. We'll have a lot more of those coming, and we're basically giving them away to all of you for free. It's sort of a way to encourage you all to check this out and to show the assets on different rigs and different characters. It's quite interesting to see how assets are sort of different depending on who you see sort of performing them. Yeah, and then assets. We have more than 1,000, I checked earlier, that are just sort of waiting to get onboarded, that we have already, that publishers have sent to us. We have a lot of publishers that want to get on the library, and we just sort of trying to build tools to make it easier to onboard them. But we have many thousands of assets there. We have lots coming every month. So if you follow our newsletters and our social media channels, we'll make sure to tell you when new cool stuff is coming on. I know we have a huge Viking selection coming that we just onboarded from Target 3D, London-based motion capture studio. So lots of cool stuff coming. So for future releases, if you look a little further down the line, we have a few things here I'll mention. So one thing is we have this great network of publishers on the Motion library already. And we want to enable you to submit a video or even a description of the ad. So if you search for something that you can't find, then you can describe what it is you want. You can record yourself with your phone, sort of showing what it is. And then we can facilitate that out to all the publishers, and then they can sort of bid on creating that for you. It seems like an obvious thing to do now that we have this great network of creators and users. We also want to enable you to organize your private asset libraries through this tool. So basically enable you to import your FBX files and your motion capture assets from all your projects that you don't have to put on the library. You don't have to put them sort of on the public marketplace, but you can use these tools that you just saw Sam demo to organize them internally for yourself. So search between them, find them from old projects. You know you have this great gunshot movement that you want to use. You just search for it, you find it, and then you use it in your project. So basically using these tools for a private library that we will be hosting in the cloud for you, so that you can log in from any machine and always find all of your assets there. We'll also enable you to upload a custom character. So your own rig, your own character, so you can actually see, as you saw here, to see all the assets displayed on that character. And then we have facial capture. A lot of these assets that are on there actually already have facial capture in them, but we'll enable sort of that. You can't get that feature out now, but that is coming. So you will actually be able to download facial capture to these. We'll have multiple characters, so you can have an FBX file with more dancing, fighting, interaction between multiple characters. We'll include props. And then we actually have a lot of really fun and awesome dog and horse assets, so quadruped assets that we will also get on there in time. So lots to look forward to, but for now, I think it's just a joy to see you all work with this tool, and we hope to see even more, as there are 150 free assets right now that you can access. So basically, you can go in. Eric has the 50 free assets. If you search for his SuperAlloy Interactive publisher profile, you'll find those. But each of these publishers have assets that they've decided to give away for free for you to get a taste. So go in there now, download them, use them for whatever you want. There's no expiration date. There is no, go ahead, use them. Yeah, let us know what you think. We really want to make this product perfect for all you. So yeah, great to be on here, and thanks so much to Autodesk for making this happen. One of the greatest things about this is, of course, the publishers, and one of the most awesome of them is Eric Jacobus, that I always find is an inspiration and such an epic guy. I wish I had his beard. So Eric and Mark, I will hand the mic over to you. If I can this time stop the screen sharing. Yes, good.
Thanks, Jakob.
Thank you, Jakob.
So, yes, really exciting stuff with the Motion Library. Thank you for all the questions. I think we answered most of them. And really, this next hour or so is really meant to be an open Q&A. So we're going to spend some time going over a lot of the do's and don'ts and the details of motion capture. But please continue to throw in your questions about Maya and the Motion Library, and our panelists will do the best they can to answer your questions. I'm going to be running the group here through a bunch of things, but we will hit the Q&A at the end as well, and between our different sections. So please keep it coming. It's been super fun to see the excitement so far. So the do's and don'ts of motion capture. First off, I wanted to welcome Eric and Zac. As you can see, we're all 20-year veterans in the industry here. That was the cutoff for the webinar. If you didn't have 20 years, you didn't make it. So as already stated, Eric's done a ton of work in the world of stunts, stunt coordinator, all kinds of film projects, as well as some YouTube stuff. So definitely Google him, check him out. And most recently, he's been famous for the God of War stunt work that he's done, which is amazing. We'll get to a bit of that a little bit later. Zac is the co-founder and EP at SuperAlloy Interactive. So he's working on the business side with Eric. And we actually worked with these guys on our mocap shoot for the 50 free assets that we did when we first launched the Rokoko motion library. So great working with these guys. We actually did a remote motion capture session. They were in Las Vegas. I was in Toronto. It was amazing. So again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Again, I'm Mark. I joined on to the Autodesk team last year. I'm the product owner on Maya and Motion Builder. I've been using both for a lot of years at a lot of big companies, doing both keyframe animation and motion capture. So I'm here to answer questions about that as well and talk to you guys about that. So next up, we have our agenda. So again, this is really a loose Q&A. We have a couple of categories we wanted to hit, and I really wanted to spark some conversation between the three of us and answer your questions that you guys might have, because motion capture is kind of this black box and sort of mystery. So first off, Eric, maybe you want to jump in and introduce yourself. Zach, hopefully everything's working for you guys, just to make sure I can hear and see you guys.
Sure. Hey, everybody. It's Eric Jacobus. And Mark said pretty much all of it. I'm a stuntman of 20 years and a filmmaker also. Got my start actually in technologies. So my first job was PHP and Visual Basic Programming. So wasn't exactly a normal transition into stunt work after that. But now I seem to be finding a place for it. So happy to be here.
Welcome. It's good to have you.
I'm Zac Swartout. As Mark said, I'm the executive producer at SuperAlloy Interactive, and I basically do everything that is not flash kicking and anything non-creative. That's basically what I do.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. As you can see, this is our agenda today. This is a sneak peek, this GIF on the right, of actually capturing the data for the motion library launch with Maya 2020.1. So I teamed up with these guys quite early, and we went through a lot of the process that we're going to go and talk about. And it was an awesome experience. So we'd like to walk you guys through that. So number one is story. So we're starting with previs here, and maybe not all of you are familiar with it, but previs is a term that gets thrown around quite a bit, and really what all it means is early planning, and it's really the pre-production before a movie or before a game gets started. And you can see some examples in the GIFs here of actually Eric in action. I wanted to start off the conversation with you guys. What does previs mean to you, and why is it so important to the process?
Well, I'll start from a performer and a choreographer perspective. If we have previs, then we know our beats. We know exactly what moves we're going to be expected to do on the day. Also, sometimes, the previs defines the choreography, and then the person on set might be a different person than the one that came up with the original choreography. So in terms of performance, it's incredibly important for the performers to be able to see the previs, and also sometimes it's nice to be able to see a previs done really slowly, just so that as a performer you can kind of figure out what all the moves are, especially if you're doing fight scenes.
Right.
And yeah, I think that those are kind of the bones of previs for us.
Have you had any times when you actually didn't have enough time for previs and you were just kind of thrown into a shoot and it was challenging?
Yeah, I mean it's so a lot of God of War was not prevised.
Interesting.
In fact, that top left video, they had prevised it with their own team in house, but by and large, I didn't go in and previs with them.
Right.
And so, but with motion capture, with those kinds of things, especially with in-game motion capture, you don't really need a whole lot of prep because you're doing individual moves. You don't need to remember 15 moves, 20 moves. You need to remember lines and things like that.
Yeah. So it's a little more integral to the cinematic moments and these types of things when there's lots of different people coming in and out of the shot and camera moves and these types of things.
Exactly.
For those that don't know, this previs of Eric on the bag here, the body bag, that was actually in prep for Gears of War, and I think it helped you get the job, didn't it?
It was for God of War. This was my audition video. At the time, I was doing Tekken in real life, and they said, "Can you come down and audition in LA?" I said, "How about I throw together an audition for you in my garage and just do a move list for Kratos instead?" And that's the one that I made, and I sent that to them. And that didn't get me the job right away, but I went in there and essentially did all those things again.
That's awesome. Just a quick check-in on questions and Q&A. I'm not going to be able to actually look at the chat as I go through this. So
don't worry, Mark, we'll monitor for you. But I got one myself, Eric. How the heck did you not hit your head in the garage? Like, what's the height of the ceiling there?
No, I did do that before. Yeah.
Come on, man.
It happened.
Yeah. That's awesome. So the next one up we have is Character Bible. So that one's thrown around a lot. And really, what does this have to do with animation? What's a Character Bible, and how is that important?
Well, I think, in terms of movement, especially now with, when we're talking about in-game, is if we have a PDF or a PowerPoint or something like that that can tell us everything that we need to know about the character, who it is, what size are they? Is it a male or a female? How many limbs does it have? What kind of weapons does it have? And so as a performer, that kind of information helps us sort of build the body language so that we can do that character justice. And then you're not having to do multiple takes over and over. I did Marvel's Avengers, I did Thor, Hulk, and some of Captain America, the in-game combat stuff. And I had done Thor, which was a lot light, and so, but when I went in to do Hulk, I took an hour and I said, hold on, let's just talk about the character for a minute and go through exactly how you envision this character moving, how you envision the combat working. Is there a lot of anticipation on every move, or is there a lot of lag at the end of the recovery on every move? Right. And we just kind of sat there, and it was actually more than an hour. We went over it just in detail. We watched YouTube clips, we watched a whole bunch of stuff, and then eventually kind of came away with a better understanding of how this character moves around. And so we ended up doing far fewer takes as a result, and saved us time. We came ahead. So that's the benefit of doing that kind of prep work. Obviously, reference is incredibly important for a character Bible. We like to joke that every character Bible has Naruto in there somewhere as a reference. I don't know why this is, but every one of them has Naruto in there. And there's always some element, from Naruto or whatever it might be, where the director or the animation lead or whatever it might be, sees something inside that reference that maybe you don't as a performer, right? So I kind of have to piece apart what they see, because they'll put Naruto, they'll put Assassin's Creed, they'll put Captain America, and then they'll put Denzel Washington from The Equalizer, and I'm like, I don't like which one. What are you seeing this? And
that's a lot to digest.
Yeah, there's a lot, and so you kind of piece it apart, and they say, well, this is the pose. Assassin's Creed is the pose and the silhouettes, and then Equalizer is kind of the intent. And so we've gone through a lot of things like that, where when you take the time to because a lot of the time the director also may not really know yet, and they put it in there sort of subconsciously, and that process helps them figure it out. So on the other side, it's a great exercise to go through this stuff with your talent, to kind of piece it apart and say, well, what, I don't know what it is. Well, what do you think? And then you might be able to find something there.
That's actually a great segue into the next section, which is the ROM, which actually stands for range of motion. And it's really common to do a range of motion, which is really just how the body's moving to test the rig and really test the pipeline. But when we do this, we're also going in and sort of prototyping and doing motion tests. So you can actually see in the bottom GIFs here, these are tests and sort of prep work we were doing in the remote shoot. So I was actually in my bedroom in Toronto, and Eric and his crew were all in Las Vegas. I think Zac was actually in Vancouver, and we were all remoting in. And I had never worked with Eric before, and we didn't really know what motion we were going to get. I had seen his reels and stuff like that, but it was really a time to just look at what motion we're getting, and we could see it live using the setup we have there in the very bottom right. You can actually see the motion on the character, and that's really important, because with actors and great performers like Eric, you kind of get lost in the performance as a director or an animator working with the data, and you stare at the face and you get sold. But if you're looking at the data on the character, you don't see that. You just see the motion for what it is. So that's really important to get right early, because if you don't get that right at the beginning, you could end up going into a mocap shoot, spending tens of thousands of dollars, and you don't have the right person in the suit for your character. So this is why we're going through all this stuff, and it's actually really important. And as an animator, this is your time to shine and get the most out of the actor, because you're gonna have to do that work later and potentially fix it up. Let's see how we're doing for time. I'm gonna move on to the next one. TJ, is there any other questions in regard to story and pre-pro that we could chat about?
I'm just reading through the lines here. One of the people reacted to, when you talked about Hulk and Naruto, I was wondering, how did the Hulk do a Naruto run? Did you do that at all? Just trying to envision like giant legs trying to do that.
Just a very angry Naruto run.
Eric, I was actually thinking now that people can access these free assets that you made from the shoot, can you talk about sort of what went into creating those and what you think those would be good for, and sort of what that kind of shoot, what does it entail? And yeah, I think you mentioned to me that you sort of tried to create this perfect idol starter pack. What do you think goes into something like that?
Well, and then Mark and Zach, feel free to chime in.
Yeah.
And I think, when we were coming up with the basic moves for this, I was thinking back to if we had a weapon, right? What would be the 50 basic moves that you could do for a previs? That would be like the bare minimum number of action moves in order to accomplish a previs, notwithstanding the whole navigation sequence, the whole navigation system. And that's kind of what we started from. And typically when we do shot lists for games, it kind of breaks down to a certain percentage is combat, a certain percentage is going to be navigation, and then you've got 5% of it is reactions, and then you have a couple deaths at the end, and then potions, special effects, and things like that. And we just kind of took that same pie chart essentially and made this move list, so that you should be able to come up with a basic action scene with these 50 animations.
Yeah, it was really a fun day. I mean, we knocked off about 50 moves in a few hours, and we couldn't have done that if Eric wasn't so well set up and well experienced with all of this. We created a shot list online. We had a theme that unfortunately we couldn't do because GDC got canceled, if you didn't know. But we had a whole theme set up, and we actually had the whole mocap shoot theme towards that. So a little bit behind the details there, but it was really efficient because we actually kind of made up a story in our heads, the story we wanted to tell in the end, not only in the mocap data, but the story and the theme within the whole GDC presentation, and how that would speak to this data that we were shooting, because we wanted people to actually get their hands on this data and have something meaningful to do with it. It wasn't just a library of moves, like random moves. You've got hit reactions, attacks, locomotion, and you can actually piece together little sequences like Eric said. So it's a pretty powerful set of animation that you can get for free.
I've got a question coming in from Angel asking, what slate are you using on that? Is it an iPad that you're just holding up there?
Yeah, it's an iPad.
Is there a special app that you use, or how do you do the slates?
You know what? I don't know what app that is. I'm sorry. But if you look at it carefully, you'll probably be able to find one like that on the App Store. But it's an iPad.
Cool.
We can do some homework and maybe follow up on that. It's pretty cool, actually.
Eric, another thing, sorry, I was just thinking also for that shoot, I know you shot sort of reactions to your own. Can you talk about that when you're just a single person doing mocap, but you have to sort of do a whole sort of scene on your own? How do you go about doing that?
Well, it all goes back to when we first started. We opened up SuperAlloy, had one mocap suit, and we only had me and Zach was in Vancouver. And we were thinking, how are we going to make a demo reel with this? Because we need to get some kind of content under our belt so that we can prove ourselves. And I said, screw it, I'm just going to make videos where I fight myself. And so I learned how to fight myself in my home office by standing here, and I put a metronome on, right? And you just go bink, 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 bink. And I go, okay, it's going to be pang, 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 pang. And then I turn around and I hit record, and I hit record again for another animation. And I go, okay, 1, 2, and pang, 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 pang. I just do, and I'll just do it like that. And then I put them side by side. And, nice thing about, Maya and Motion Builder is that you can change the timing however you need to do it. And so that stuff is easy. And then it's nice too, because I don't actually get hit. But then when I move the characters closer together, I used to have to hide that stuff with the camera. You don't have to.
You don't normally get hit, right? It's stunt acting. I guess someone's following your social account here, Eric, and the question came in is, what's your favorite martial arts action scene that you've seen, either in film or game?
Man. Sorry,
Good question.
Asked me that. Yeah, I think a Police Story with Jackie Chan in 1985 has that end fight in the mall has everything. So that's kind of like my modern favorite. And then my traditional favorite would be Drunken Master 2. I'm the sucker for Jackie Chan, but Drunken Master 2, the finale there. They just kind of have everything. It's like a 101, stunts 101 class watching those.
Cool.
That's actually, that brings up a comment actually, Eric, that you made when we were doing some of the planning. You mentioned how animators, it's great for animators to take martial arts classes or get into learning choreography themselves. I wanted to switch the slide here, but choreography is integral to mocap shoots, specifically for stunts and fight scenes. But more importantly for this topic, it's really important for animation and for animators to understand how their body moves. And in terms of mocap, being able to sort of describe things with their body. Time and time again, I've had to kind of act something out for the talent before we go and shoot it, because you can't just write down everything on paper and expect somebody to know what it is. And that's really what the shot list is. But maybe we should talk about the walkthrough and choreography there.
I've got a funny story. When I was doing God of War, one of the animators, Mehdi, he would demonstrate the moves for Kratos. He would say, and he's when he fights, it should be like, boom, and he would do this crazy looking movement with his body. And I watch him and I go, dude, I don't even know how to do that. I actually had to learn to move like him.
Interesting.
In order to do the character justice. And,
wow.
With that is like a whole bunch of, there's the roll and all that stuff. And so it was like taking a martial art class for 2 years doing that game.
Wow.
And, we do a lot of takes too, in order to get that movement just right. And, that speaks to the point that animators, a lot of the time, man, like animators know exactly what they want and they can show it with their body. They may not be able to describe it very well. Right. And what will help with that is obviously speaking to mocap. It just takes practice to be able to convey, verbally exactly what you need with your body. And then also, when you actually are doing the thing that you're animating, right? So if you're animating a boxing game, for example, your animation will be better if you're a boxer. And it's not simply experience, it's that by doing the movement, you actually are able to see the movement better. So when you do things, your eye and your ear and everything is better adjusted to seeing that movement. You'll actually be a better critique of movement.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it's pretty well known in the animation community. Even if you're keyframing animation, most animators start off with some video reference. They might draw some sketches of the poses they want to hit. Mocap is really no different in that sense. This is why we do walkthroughs against the shot list. So you might have a list of requirements from whatever project you're working on, whatever game it is. But it's really important before you even meet with a stuntman like Eric to go with your team and walk through what it is you're going to shoot. Because you might be shooting 100 moves in a day. You might be shooting 10 cinematics, but there might be 10 people involved. And so you do the math. If you get something wrong, it adds up very, very quickly. And you also don't want to have any confusion on the floor. And we'll get into that in our sort of actor-director relationship. But the more comfortable the actor or the stunt person, the motion actor is, the better motion you're going to get. If you go in and say, here's my shot list, here's my 10 moves, go do it, you're going to get a robot. You're going to get something that's not appealing. And it might be real life motion, but it's not going to be appealing. And that's what we do when we walk through the move. We're talking about the context. We're talking about the stuff we already talked about with the story, with the character. Who is this guy? What's his motivation? Did he just lose a family member? Is he enraged? Is he exhausted? All that paints the picture for the talent to do the best motion in context to what you want to do. So that's something we talked about quite a bit when we did our shoot together. Do you have any experience with that, Eric, that you'd like to speak to?
You know, whenever we were doing the cinematic combat in Mortal Kombat 11, we would spend a fair amount of time walking through it. We would do, we would do it probably for 5-10 minutes, just a single piece of choreography.
Right.
And the reason for that was because when we actually ended up shooting it, we'd do 1 or 2 takes and we'd nail it. And you know,
Right.
it's the same. It's the same with dialogue, I think, and that you know you don't need to be burning takes. Although with motion capture, it's free. You can be recording the rehearsals.
Right.
But there is a there is a certain amount of, you know, when you do something slowly in a walkthrough, which I'm a firm believer that you walk through it very slowly, walk it at 10% speed.
Right.
And then when you actually go for it, do it at 75% speed, and that'll be pretty fast. Right. But you won't have the pressure of going full speed.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
And you'll get what you want in the end, because in the end, you're, as a director or an animator, a lot of times you're trying to please, as you can see in the images below, there could be, you know, 10 people from your production staff all watching, and you're trying to please your cinematic director, and there might be someone in layout who is expecting the people to be walking a specific way, and you're dealing with virtual worlds too. So it's very important to walk through things and paint the picture for the actors, because they're in this big white room or a big green space, and they don't know there's a castle there, or they're on the side of a cliff. So you can do that in the walkthrough, and you can take note in your shot list. So as you get to that move, oh yeah, there's a castle on this, so maybe acknowledge this castle or something like this.
Absolutely. Yeah. When we were doing a fight one time, and Carlos, the choreographer at Another Realm, he's awesome. He's the original Raiden. He said he had an idea for interacting with the environment that we just didn't think of. We were standing there in the middle fighting, and it's like, there's a wall right there. You know, you can use that, right? And we went, oh, we slam a guy up against the wall. Yeah. So
you're making actual creative decisions based on the layout and walking through it together, instead of trying to figure every answer out before you go into the shoot.
That's right. I mean, with your previs, you know, with fight choreography especially, you're going to throw at least half of it out anyway. And, you know, I think that you should, so that you can accommodate great new ideas coming in, accommodate new things happening, like, oh, the set changed, which it will. Everything's going to change in 3D. When you get the layout, when you start shooting it, the layout's going to change. Things constantly change. So be, you know, train yourself to be open to these things. That's a
really good point. I know because of that, it's actually a habit that I've kind of sort of, I guess I just do it naturally now, but I take multiple takes just in case. I don't just go in and say, I'm going to do this fight sequence. That's the one, that's all we need. I'll actually take maybe the top 3 out of 10, maybe 5, to give myself some flexibility, because the camera might change, something might change, or I might actually miss something. Because when I'm in the shoot, I'm only one set of eyes, and there could be, you know, 5 different actors doing things at different times, and I might miss something. So that's really interesting too.
So it's a really cool stream. We actually have a friend of ours from Chicago tuned in. So you mentioned Carlos, and he's there, and he says thanks for the shout out. Another Realm is representing.
That's awesome.
We had a good question here coming in from Dan. He wanted to know, when you guys go to choreograph the scene, like, how do you approach it? Do you, like, is your main goal the individual moves and beats, or do you think of like the overall story, or how do you do that?
Oh yeah. The best example of this I can think of is when I did a short film called Blindsided, directed by Clayton Barber, and we approached the choreography from a very pure perspective. Before that, whenever I would approach choreography, I'd kind of approach it like, I want to do these moves, I want to kind of accomplish this flavor, I want to use this move, I don't want to use this move, and the camera angle should look like that. But with Blindsided, which was later on, obviously, Clayton was helping me mature as a storyteller, choreographer, and he said, story first, story. And I said, okay, so what's the story of Blindsided? It's a blind samurai with a sword. Okay, so that is your multiplier. So you have to take whatever the story is, whatever the kernel is of that character, right? And in that case, it was a blind man. In the case of The Man Who Feels No Pain, which I action directed in India, one of the main characters doesn't feel pain. One of the main characters is on a crutch, right? And so those are the things that make choreography happen. I could go in there with all kinds of ideas of how movement should happen, but bottom line, the story has to make sense. The guy who doesn't feel pain should be walking face first into punches because you and I have to block. He doesn't. So that changes every single move. So I'm always looking for that modifier, Dan. And if I can find that modifier, and the modifier might be the environment too, or it might be the MacGuffin in the scene, right? Like in Indiana Jones with the medallion on the ground and things like that. Try to find that MacGuffin, and then from there, it's like you just tell the story, and the moves just fall into place. I find no issue, deciding between this punch and this punch. It just doesn't matter at a certain point. The story is king.
Yeah, that's really, it's kind of like the texture at that point, the different beats of the fight. But yeah, it also depends on what it is you're shooting and the style that you're shooting. So a lot of directors actually like to use virtual cameras now. So they'll bring in their team to do the choreography, and they'll work the camera work around what's actually happening. And the story is really driving what's happening, and the camera is really just capturing that the best way possible. The flip side of that is some studios and some directors, they do previs, they do storyboard art, almost like a comic book, and those camera angles are already set. So the actor has to conform, and the choreography has to conform to that camera angle because it's already been approved in the pipeline, and things are already starting to be built. So there's multiple styles, and you need to explain that to the talent. You can't just come in and say, okay, we're doing this. You guys do, shot 1A. You have to give them that context. That's why context is on there. It's their intent for performing, but it's also the way we're operating as a team because there's so many moving parts going on. So that's an interesting question. Thanks for that one.
When you mentioned that, it's interesting. We did a cinematic for Bungie where we motion captured a cinematic for their Destiny 2 Season of the Worthy. And when we were doing the scene, we had no idea what the camera angles would be. And so we had to make choreography that worked for any camera angle. We just didn't know what it would be. Sometimes that's a creative blessing. Sometimes it's actually very challenging. Actually, when you tell me all the angles have been set, I find that to be very creatively engaging because now you've given me this canvas with this brush. Well, cool. Then I can go to town now. Sometimes being given the world is kind of daunting.
Yeah, it really is, especially with games, because if you're in an open world game, I worked at Ubisoft for a bunch of years. We're making open world games and open world cutscenes essentially that will just happen in the world. So I can't really tell the actor where the camera is going to be because the user can be anywhere. So it's got to be an appealing shot, an appealing motion from every degree, which we'll touch on in our next little section. But it can be really challenging. But if you know what you're doing and you have this information, you can use it as a tool. Any more questions for that section? Or should we move on?
I think it's a good time to move on. I think you got a bunch of interesting stuff to go through.
Yeah. So this is direction, but it's really the actor and animator relationship. There's a quote that I've heard. Sorry, I can't give props to the person that actually came up with it, but it's actors are animators and animators are actors, and understanding the sort of craft that each does and having that relationship is key. And that was something that was just natural when Eric and I started talking. If you don't have that, we wanted to try and give you some tips on how you can sort of bond and get that relationship going at the start of your shoot so that you get amazing performances like this. Because otherwise you get that sort of robot thing and essentially your mocap actor feels like they're a bit of a slave and they're just being told what to do, which you don't want. You're hiring someone like Eric because of his experience and his talents, and you want to sort of unleash that by establishing a great relationship with them. And it's not always easy to do. So I wanted to kind of talk through that with you guys. One thing that I've done in the past at a lot of different studios is I always try and meet the actor in person. Usually when we're doing, they're sending me previs or maybe an audition tape. And I like to actually interview them and see what it's like to just communicate with them. Because if you don't have that communication on day one, it's going to be really hard to work with them potentially for a whole week. I've done motion capture shoots back at Electronic Arts where we were shooting for 2 weeks straight, 10-hour days, and you have to be, you know, in sync, almost thinking on the same way as these people. So I kind of treat it like almost like a job interview when I first start the project. Have you ever been through that before, Eric?
Like a personal interview. I mean, that that helps more than you can, well, as you know, but I think a lot of people kind of, they might think sometimes, especially with stunt performers, that we can sort of just walk in and give you exactly what you want and walk out because it's just movement. Because, you know, when you're keyframe animating, you just go in and you just make the movement, right? But here's what will happen with your actors and with your performers is if you don't have a rapport with the people that you're directing, then when they do something that you don't approve of, then you might have a tendency to try and marionette them in a very uncomfortable way, right? So for example, if you if I'm supposed to do a line, for example, and your response is, yeah, it should be like this, and you give an example for, you know, you give an example of how they should be acting. Well, you may not really be giving the actor the feedback the way that they need feedback. Right. And so that's why it's so important to be able to, because your first take is not going to be, it's not going to be perfect. You have to be able to guide your performer into the right channel. And so that initial process is incredibly important. And it may actually tell you whether or not you should hire that performer.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think the term guide is a great example. As a director of a shoot, any shoot needs someone who's clearly in charge. And there's a real fine line when you're organizing a shoot, whether you're a lead animator or an animator working on that section of the project. You need to be able to come into this motion capture session and know what you want, and you need to give solid direction, but at the same time, you need to be able to unleash this performance out of an actor. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Sometimes in the past, I would actually bring in highlight tapes as I was working on a lot of sports games early in my career. And it was really hard to get athletes, especially professional athletes like at EA Sports, to come in and give you really engaging 100% effort because, you know, they're already getting paid. They don't even really need to be there. So they come in and you ask them to run hard and do a move. Yeah. That move, once you put it in the game, it looks slow, it looks lazy. So you got to get them in the mood. The same thing goes for stunt coordination and fighting. If you bring in people cold and just say, okay, run into that wall or, you know, do a parkour sequence, you got to give them that context that we already talked about, but you also have to get them motivated. And you also have to be, you have to understand the pacing of the day. So maybe you start off with some locomotion stuff. Maybe you do all your crash mat stuff at the end of the day, in case the stunt actor hurts themselves, and then you miss out on the rest of the day. So you really have to plan, but also guide and direct to get the best out of these people. And if you're dealing with performance, you actually have to give those little nuggets that will actually put the person in the right headspace to act that out as well. So maybe you're acting on a scene and the actor's son died. You actually have to paint that picture for them and spring that on them at the right moment to get the performance. So it's a real fine line, that actor and animator relationship that I think a lot of people overlook with motion capture. You don't just get motion that's been recorded. You actually, you're getting motion from a crafted sequence. So a lot of the same skills that come from filmmaking and keyframe animation actually happen with motion capture. You just don't see it if it's done right. That ties into in-game versus performance capture, I think, pretty nicely. We already talked a bit about that, but we talked about acting to a camera and taking advantage of the camera versus taking advantage of working on an in-game motion. Is there any sort of tips there that you can call back on, Eric?
Well, I think, so with cinematic motion, with PCAP, right, performance capture and cinematic capture.
Yeah.
It always helps the performer to know where the camera is. If you don't know, then okay, then you gotta make lemonade. But it's not that bad. But you know what I'm saying? It's better to understand how to play to the camera, because actors are used to doing that. They're used to playing to the camera. Now with stunt performers, it's kind of the same, but a lot of the time stunt performers rehearse the action scene kind of camera agnostic, right? And in a movie, for example, and then they'll go on set and they'll do the whole fight scene, and they'll shoot it from 15 angles, or shoot it coverage style, and they'll just kind of pick the angles that they need later. Now, if we want to make the process as efficient as possible for someone who's doing cinematic motion capture, then it's best to figure out where the camera angle is, so we know exactly how to play the action from that angle, right? Or at least some kind of general idea, because a certain punch, like this punch, works to hit somebody from some angles, and then when you go profile, it doesn't hit the guy anymore, right? So, and I know you can stretch some of that stuff in post, but maybe you don't want to do post. Maybe you just want to get it. Right. So understanding the camera angle is incredibly important. And then with in-game, though, you're kind of in an interesting situation where the camera angle is probably fixed, right? Most likely it's fixed somewhere. And so you're going to perform the action based on that camera angle. And as a performer, I'm always trying to find the camera. If the camera's over my shoulder, right, if the camera is y'all right now, I'll try and play. And that's how we did Kratos in God of War.
Yeah, that's a good
point. I had a question at one point. I had the axe, and we were trying to figure out, like, how do we get this guy on camera more often? It's the back of his head the whole time. And at one point I said, can I just play to the camera like this? And then yeah, totally, do that.
Awesome.
So, and then, you know, there's other things like they also have the head rage that we do every time we do an attack. And that allows Kratos to look back at the camera too. They can kind of warp that head movement back toward camera a little bit also.
Oh, that's great.
And so
yeah, that's a really good point. Playing to the camera in games, especially, like obviously with performance capture and cinematics in both games and film, the camera could be set, or it's a virtual camera, and you can see that directly. But a lot of times in games, when you're doing motion capture, you don't have any idea what the camera angle is. And what I've seen recently is we're coming up with ways to connect the camera right inside the mocap shoot, where you can connect it to the actor and create the same camera information, the same lens, same field of view, and you can constrain it like a first-person camera. And the motion capture actors can actually see their hands in real time, much like they would once you get it into Maya. And that is key in itself for shooting things, like you said. Posing and getting that right during mocap is just going to save you time actually having to edit that later in Maya. So that's really interesting.
We had a little bit of a discussion going on the side here on you guys.
Okay.
I'm trying to find out where it started, but basically, Sean asked a question around, like, do you guys see motion capture as a way to sort of archive like living choreographers, like famous modern dance companies or something like that? And then that sort of got into, wouldn't it be cool to do that for martial artists as well? And who would you record, etc. But do you think of mocap as a way to sort of archive stuff, or how accurate do you think it is?
That's tough.
I can jump in. Like, so working at a lot of the larger studios, it's a common thing for studios to create their own libraries. The challenging part is you've got all these different teams working on different projects with different ways of doing things, different naming conventions. And unfortunately, a lot of times things get captured more than once. That doesn't really make sense from a business standpoint. So there's a lot of companies looking for solutions to actually manage their data. And this is where the motion library actually has some advantages. It filters things. You can do quick searches and access data really quickly. So that is an archive of motion, which is invaluable. Back in the day, working on different shows, I would actually have to filter through just lists of mocap and load one at a time into Maya, or in some cases Motion Builder, and it just takes a lot of time, and they're named some crazy names. So I think that's a big focus on the future, and I think the motion library is really heading in the right direction there. I think as far as what the publishers are doing, maybe Zac and Eric want to speak to that more, but there's some amazing data already out there, which is a huge asset.
I think I just want to say, like, on that note, Mark, on what we're hearing from some of the big studios, it's not directly related to this question, but just what you said about reshooting stuff. I think what we're hearing is just the problem of even big studios saying, I have 1,000 gunshots that I've done again and again. I just can't find them. I just can't find the project. I didn't name the file correctly. That's one of the pain points we really want to solve. Like, that's just awful, right? Having to book a studio or a performer and reshoot stuff that you could just find. So I think, yeah, that's definitely something we're working on enabling even more. How can we help you tag your assets or auto tag them so you can actually just load in your files? We'll sort them for you, and then you can just find all your old stuff, even from the 10-year-old project. Just like, yeah. So I think that's,
and also,
yeah.
to jump in on top of that, what Jakob was saying, but the motion library is also designed with like teams in mind very much.
That's right.
So it's designed so that you can, if you're a small studio, you can have one person who's purchased, a library of assets you're using on a game or a film or whatever, and then everyone can log in, have access to the same assets. Eventually you'll be able to like make comments and stuff. So the motion library has very much been built up like from a production teamwork kind of perspective, which I think is always helpful, if you're trying to get things done quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a whole, we could probably talk for half an hour just on that topic. It's a great question. I think a lot of different teams, including us and Rokoko here, are trying to solve getting people access to this stuff as fast and efficiently as possible, so that you're actually spending your time, manipulating and creating things with it, instead of just trying to find a specific run cycle with a sword, for instance. So that's a great question.
It's great to see in the chat also I just asked what kind of movements motions people sort of want to use. Cool. And what's most common. Yeah, and it does align very much with with what we're hearing. But I think Sean Capone is saying about the search. That's definitely something that we are. So the search is sort of tied to the tagging, right? The better the assets are tagged, the easier it will be. We're trying to sort of make these auto tagging tools and enable all kinds of ways we can help you search. So what we want is basically you searching for sort of not just fight, but like aggressive, fighting, blah, 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 like adding a lot of adjectives to like find exactly what you want. But that really, then you need good tagging, right? So that's one of the things that we're asking the publishers to really have in mind, really labeling their assets very accurately, so you can actually find that. And I think, it's again also from what Eric told about how you go about this. It would be great to even all the way down to like the character Bible, just know what I think. There's the stuff people search for to find these things. I just know for myself also from sound libraries, right? When you try to find this like one seagull that like a horse seagull at a seaside or something, right? So you really want to find it. And I think, it's definitely something we're working on, Sean, so to improve that tagging and that search capability.
Also touches on a lot of the future stuff that we were talking about. Maybe down the line, we have quadrupeds or creature type movements, or, the limits are really endless when you have so many people just contributing to a community like this. So we want to see, people grab a suit and just create a library themselves and tag it and put it up there, and people will start using it, and that snowball effect will happen. So that's really exciting times.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also, so Eric is very sort of versatile and can do all kinds of moves, right? But there are some people that are sort of very niche, like they're super good at some very special move, and that's exactly the kind of people we also want in the library. If you're the best horseback arrow whatever. So that, I mean, we want those to get on there, right? Because they can do one thing better than anyone else. And yeah, so that's also, that is actually to open up more. That's the kind of publishers we're looking for, someone who really claims a niche. Yeah.
So then
really
another cool question came in. I like this one a lot because it makes you think a bit, but how would you convince a client that is hesitant to use previs or well thought of pre-production kind of stuff? Like how would you convince them that that's actually useful? Aside from hitting them in the head with an axe.
Yeah, I mean, it does come down to the math, but seeing team buy-in early and really the cost effectiveness and getting to the golden shot quicker is there's really no denying that in my experience. So previs, it's a bit more work up front, but you save so much time down the line, and that can really be demonstrated just with the quality that you get earlier, but also the numbers. So just doing some numbers on a typical motion capture shoot, if you're going to a studio, you name it, it can cost you around $10,000 to $20,000 to start just for the day of shooting. So if you don't go in there knowing what you want, you could potentially be losing tens of thousands of dollars just for 1 or 2 days. So those numbers speak to themselves, I think.
Yeah, Zach and I have definitely convinced some smaller indie studios, and maybe you could speak to this, Zach, but there is some sort of trepidation sometimes for smaller studios to do previs.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's about being able to tell a story, right? Where, you know, we've done a day or two of live action previs to kind of get combat choreography right for cinematic, and, you know, talking to the cinematic director afterwards and being like, this would have taken us 3 days on a huge optical stage, and instead it took us half a day. Like, that's a massive money savings. Right. Yeah. So it's doing that kind of thinking and that kind of work to then be able to turn around and tell that story to someone who's hesitant. Right. And oftentimes Eric and I are not in the business of selling, you know, ketchup popsicles to people with white gloves. That's not what we do. So we're a very niche kind of thing that we do. And so someone speaking to the language of and the value of what it is that we do, someone either gets it or they don't. And I'm not trying to like push someone into a corner and say, you need to work with us. That's not the business that we're in.
Yeah, the results, I think, speak for themselves. I do think, like, money aside and time aside, time is money, but quality is another side of this that is really important. Like when you're drawing something, when you're creating concept art, or back in the day with 2D animation, it took like 1,000 bad drawings or bad poses to get to that good one. And if you're spending tens of thousands of dollars for a week just kind of going through the motions and then figuring it out, it's going to take you a really long time to get everything from motion capture all the way into your pipeline, and then you finally see it in the game and or the production, and you don't really like it. That's really time consuming and very expensive, and you're just not going to get to the good ideas quickly. So doing these tests early, it's all about getting to these good ideas and coming up with a better film or a better commercial or a better game in the long run. So
I think also
super important.
Like, so for anybody, it's like previs is very much sort of the sweet spot also for us at Rokoko, because I think what was missing was sort of, I come also from doing live action stuff, right? Where you're testing, you have actors in, you're trying stuff out, and half of what you do, you don't use. Like that, you throw it away again, right? Because that was a thing that you had an idea, you tried it out, it didn't really work. So that is the room you want. That's the creative space, right? When you can actually test out ideas and like, how does this character, like, how does he walk? How does he feel? Like, if you don't have a room to try that out and visualize that when you're doing animation and VFX, like you just end up with stuff, either stuff that that wasn't what you wanted, or that didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, or just like that room, that's where the magic happens, when you can try stuff out and leave, like sort of kill your darlings. So I think previs is so key, and I think it's missing from this high end. Like when you have a volume, right, and you booking an actor and booking a studio, there's really no room to mess up. And I think it's such an important part of any creative, any process really.
Yeah, so I guess to
think that
summarize
comment-
all that, it's spend the money early and you save the money at the end. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
you get better quality
Yeah.
in the long run. In my experience,
We
Go
have
ahead,
about
sir.
15 minutes left. Did you have more questions on another slide there, Mark?
no, I think this is it. The last thing we were going to talk about a bit was stage versus camera, which is
Right.
different. It's different than working to the camera. So one sort of common misconception with motion capture is you act the same way you would on a camera, but it's not necessarily the case. So quite often I've told actors and performers to sort of tie into their stage acting mode, which is someone acting on Broadway, that's being viewed from a distance on a stage where a person can literally be anywhere. So it's very common to have a conversation with the actor to say, you know, make that pose bigger and more visible, because like I said earlier in the discussion, if I'm just looking at the actor's eyes, I'm going to be sold on that performance. So I've actually told performers in the past during mocap, I'm not going to look you in the face. I'm looking at your chest. You know, forgive me right now. I'm not checking you out. I'm looking at your silhouette. I'm not looking at your face, because a lot of times, unless I'm doing facial performance capture, I'm not even getting that facial performance. So it's really about what the body is doing. And it's not necessarily just acting it out. So it touches on a lot of the concepts we've talked about, but I think it's often forgotten that motion capture acting is not quite the same as acting on television or something.
You know, I had a comment to tie that and the previous comment together. You had mentioned the animation workflow and trying things out and taking animation, it just doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to performing, one conversation I had one time changed a lot because I asked them, what is the animation style going to be in the end? And that helped them tailor how to direct me, right? So
Yeah.
it stopped being about, okay, just go in and do martial art moves, go and swing the sword. No, it became, okay, actually all we care about is the silhouette, and we need you to be a little bit off balance on your recovery because your character is kind of a dummy, right? So, okay, so focus on silhouette. So hit a really good silhouette. Don't worry about powering through it, but then give enough gravity so that you can stumble a little bit at the end and give that realistic body movement. And it's going to be different for every game, right? And so a performer might go in and say, okay, I'm going to swing a sword around, and then the director's going to go, I don't know, so it's just not right, you know. But if they have a conversation about what actually matters, then the performer knows what pieces to hit, and I find that to be incredibly useful on shoots when I can have that info, if they can give it to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, knowing that the end style, because motion capture is used as almost like a block-in phase for animation. If you're an animator, you'll know what I mean. But you rarely just put the motion capture into the shot and into the game. You have to sort of sculpt the motion, which is a lot of the focus we have on the tools at Autodesk, is giving you more control. You know, changing the timing, time warping the shot, exaggerating the poses once you've got it into Maya. But again, it's a process. So understanding that process the whole way through and getting to the end result quicker is super key, for sure. Any other questions on this section before we sort of break it open into like an open Q&A for the day? All good?
Yeah, it seems pretty good on this
Yeah,
chat
thanks,
so
Mike.
far.
Cool. So I'm going to hand it off, I believe, to Jocelyn. I don't have another slide. I just have my Q&A slide here. So I know we're supposed to end at 4:30. We're at around 4:17 right now. We can just open it up to Q&A, and anyone's free to answer about anything, I assume.
Yeah, so if anyone has additional questions, go ahead and throw them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll try to answer them now.
I know that Sam is suited up actually, and would love to demo our plugin for our suit in Maya. So if there's nothing else, we can also jump back to the questions. But I don't know.
I've got a few
Yeah.
more questions that came in. I got some off band here, but one person was trying to find out from Eric what your sort of physical training is. Like, do you find you have to train a lot for sort of crashing or punching, or what's your regime that you do?
Yeah, I mean, with stunts, okay, so the thing that you're going to get hurt, the thing that's going to hurt with stunts is your neck, because you're going to be taking reactions. And I've yet to be on a mocap shoot where they didn't take me through 50 reactions back to back. And that's tough. That's you taking a punch like this and then like this, and you're doing that for 30 minutes or so. Try that in the mirror. It's actually the worst part. I gotta admit, I'd rather sprint all day. So that's the thing that's the thing that I always warm up for sure, is my neck. And unfortunately, there's not really any safe exercises you can do for that. The best thing you can do is just not do reactions too often. But in general, I do a strength-based exercise, kettlebells, things like that. I try and avoid injury also, which means I don't actually work out very much. And because my job requires 8 hours of fairly rigorous movement, and that's really my workout. The other days are my days off. So, but if in the off season, it's just, basic kettlebell training. And again, I don't do too much. I just keep it safe.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know when we're on set a lot, you get stunt actors knows what they're doing. They're doing, obviously you can do your break falls and you want to try to hide it, but you still try to protect yourself as you're landing. But break falls, not much you can do with the head, right? It's still gonna be snapping around a bit.
No, it's just form. You just got to train your form, and if you want to look painful, it's probably going to be painful a lot of the time. I mean, even falling on an 8-inch mat, you do it 20 times. The 20th one might sting, and then you've got that kind of for the rest of the day. And so, like Mark said, put it at the end.
Yeah, no, it's good. The Mark, I know when I've done directing myself on same thing. Like, I'm not doing the falls and snapping my head around a bit. Like, you do tend to act out that a little bit. And by the end of a shoot, or certainly the second day, like, I start feeling my back, and I'm getting a bit old maybe, but do you find that same thing on the director side, that you have to conscious on stuff?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've done shoots for a whole week, 2 weeks straight, and you have to be on for 10 hours, and you're the eyes on everybody in directing and keeping everything in time, and you're using your voice, projecting yourself, and it's exhausting. I would make sure I go to bed early. I was hydrating the whole time and have that coffee in the morning, but also I would actually stretch, believe it or not, with the talent, and sort of incorporate their routine into mine, because I got to be with it too. So I actually would just try and get in their heads again. I try and get on the same page. We would sort of do a warm up together, and almost like a cool down at the end. And of course, at the end of the shoot, we'd have some snacks and drinks, and send off the shoot and the end of the day.
Cool. Yeah, it can be draining for sure. So it's impressive you do that all the time. The other question I got on Twitter. What's that?
Get good shoes too. Make sure you wear very good shoes. Look at Steven Spielberg and these guys. Get their shoes. Get the shoes that they wear.
Yeah.
Which shoes you got on?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I've got Skechers on right now.
Skechers. But you should get good shoes.
I wouldn't direct them these though.
No, I hear you. The other question I got on Twitter, someone wanted to know about like more the head-mounted cameras. Like, some of these ones they're football shape and they're out significantly far, and depending on often they're cobbled together by the studio, right? So you've got nice light ones, you got heavy, like some people even have like almost a GoPro out there. How does that affect your acting, especially when you're doing stunts?
Oh, it's huge. You can't. I mean, you don't do stunts when you're wearing one of those. You have to do. So if you have the same performer doing the stunts and the head cam, do a pickup day or shoot face cam at the end of the day and just pick it up. It's especially if you're doing one-on-one, those cameras will just get locked into each other, and it's like, it's bad news. It's hard too, especially if you're doing an intimate scene. I mean, how do you get close? Because that camera's got to be about here. And I know they're getting a little bit closer with time, but still, you've got something here, and you're supposed to have an intimate scene with somebody.
Yeah.
Look, I respect actors more than I ever did, because I can't imagine pulling off a performance with this thing in your face, with a light shining in your eyes. and make it look realistic. It's incredibly hard. I've only done that once. It's hard, and I had to shave for it. That was the last time I shaved, by the way. So if somebody out there in the world figures out how to do facial capture with beards, you're gonna make a lot of money. You will.
Is it, Mark, from a directing standpoint, is it any different when talent's got like essentially a giant football helmet on their head?
Yeah, it's really tough. You know, it's when you're capturing facial capture, most of the time you've got these multiple head cameras on another monitor on the side of the stage. So that's where I actually would bring in like a lead animator or another animator to have eyes, sometimes multiple people on the different actors, because let's face it, most of the time you're not going to get everyone's best performance on the same take. So sometimes we'd actually say, like at Ubisoft, we do these massive shoots, and you might have 8 people with headsets on, so you've got 8 cameras, and you'd actually have to say, oh, I'd like take 5, take 3, and take 4, and you'd actually have to call out the actors' takes that you liked and then splice it together at the end, because it's so challenging that way. The other side of it was we actually would have to give the actors breaks because those lights are so bright. It's actually can give them headaches and stuff. So we actually had to have a schedule and sort of time out the day with that in mind. It's a different sort of exhaustion that you get with that helmet on.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, even just the weight, as you said, like if you're snapping your head around and doing stuff like that's gonna mess up how you do that, right?
Sometimes we'd actually have, I remember one time we were shooting a character on a horse, and the stunt person was on the horse, and then we actually
facial camera for a horse.
No, I wish, but we had someone riding in on a horse on a stunt, and there was actually the main actor, not the stunt person, doing the facial on the side of the shoot in context with the timing of everything. So you actually had 2 people you were directing, and then they were going to be put together. So the talent, the face talent, and then the body talent. It's really interesting.
Wow, that is crazy.
I did facial capture for the God of War trailer actually, and I had to hold the axe at one point, and of course, I'd never really worn a facial cam before, and as soon as I picked up the axe, it just knocked the camera. And so I was like, look, I'm not an actor. I'm a stunt guy. Just give me the weapon. I had to do facial for that too. So it's you just have to be incredibly aware of your surroundings when you're wearing one of those things.
For sure.
Yeah, that was the other sort of question people wanted to know. Is there any sort of like, what's your funniest sort of behind the scenes blooper, if you will?
Okay. All right. Let's see what I could give away without getting in trouble.
Yeah.
So one time, I don't know if I should mention the game. I don't think I will. So there was a game that I worked on where they gave me a weapon, and it was supposed to be a heavy weapon. So they made it heavy, which we'd done. That's fine, right? And I'm kind of swinging it around, going like, okay, yeah, it's definitely heavy. And it was this long wooden stick with this, I don't know, some 3D object at the top that was heavy. I don't know what it was. It was all taped up. It was a cylinder, and so I'm supposed to take this thing and really emphasize the weight as I come and hit a bag on the ground, right? Like, cool, ready to go. And action, I go, whoo, and I felt, and as I'm going down, time stopped. I felt that thing fly off the edge.
Oh no.
We're in, $1 million mocap stage. If it hits one of those cameras, my career is done. If it hits one of those cameras, one Lightstorm camera goes down, and I'm watching it sail, and it goes like this toward the main director, toward his nuts, and it hits his badge and bounces off, and then hits nothing else.
Oh my gosh.
So at that moment, I knew there was a God, and because everybody was safe.
That's amazing. Yeah, because they usually put like a shark cage. If you've never been on set, they have like a little cage around the camera. So, and that's always my joke on set. Like, you're not even supposed to touch a cage, let alone the camera, because you have to calibrate everything again. So I'm always like, oh, what's this? And pretend to poke at it. And like, 10-pound thing flying at one of those is not a good idea.
Exactly.
How about Mark? Do you have any funny stories?
The only bloopers I have is when I tried to actually suit up and be Master Chief on Halo. that's funny in itself. So I saw myself in the I saw myself in the suit, and I was in my 30s by that point, and that was funny in itself. So needless to say, we didn't use the data, but we prevised it. So that's about
awesome.
the best I can do.
Well, it's probably a good time to wrap, so I'll let Jocelyn say thank you. But again, I've got a lot of feedback from various people, so just while I have the mic on, I'll make sure that everyone's saying thank you from the chat. So really appreciate your time.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you everybody. This has been great.
I'll just share my screen really quickly to wrap it up. All right, so thank you everyone again for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, especially given the tough circumstances right now. So thank you. We will work on getting the recording of this session up online as soon as possible, and we'll be tweeting that out from the Maya Twitter channel as well as our Facebook page. If you're looking for any additional how-tos or learning content, we also have our Maya learning channel at the bottom link there. So once again, thank you, and thank you to everyone that presented today as well, from Rokoko and SuperAlloy Interactive. This was a great session.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.